I said, George, just explain the fundamentals of the geo-tracker to the audience. And George came back with a campaign with a bunch of monkeys that are pointing to different features of the geo-tracker, and it said the fundamentals of the geo-tracker. And then you turn the page, and it was the fun. And then you turn the page, and it was the mentals.
A mentor, a colleague, and a friend.
Family, laughs, work.
Creativity, passion.
Funny.
Smart, witty, charming.
Happy.
Dedicated. Trustworthy and honorable.
Big personality and genuine.
Loving, caring, and funny.
Very diplomatic, extremely positive.
Sexy.
The big Greek. He was big and loud and funny.
Laughter, generosity, and passion.
That's the thing about George. He just was always welcoming the first time you met him and every day after that.
When we were in high school together, he was class president, and he was just one of those guys that everybody really liked.
One of those people that you aspire to be.
First impression of George is this guy is funny and cool, and I think I want to be a creative director.
If you knew him professionally, you knew him personally, because he was one and the same.
George is just a guy who always gave everything that he had to everybody, and I can only believe that the people that he gave the most to were his family.
Sometimes it was a comic relief.
He was always so loud.
He'd always come to all of our games, regardless of what his work schedule was like. He just cared about all of us the same way he cared, I know he cared about everybody here.
First and foremost, his children, but I think his other love was definitely his job, his career.
He loved to write, and he loved to communicate, and he really enjoyed the craft of advertising.
I think he had a great love of creative writing, and his quick wit and sense of humor always came out in that.
I mean, he had a wicked sense of humor, as most good writers do anyway.
He got into it naturally because of the talent he had for just being able to express himself.
To bring a message down to its essence.
You could see it in every project we ever did, whether it was a small brochure that maybe only 100 people would see, to an ad that millions of people would see. He brought that same intensity and passion to everything that he did.
And he was full throttle all the time, and he didn't know how to hold back, and he didn't want to know how to hold back.
He was the first guy in and the last guy to leave.
He liked to get up incredibly early in the morning. George got her done by, being here at the crack of dawn and being here late at night. It was ridiculous. George would regularly visit me in the cutting room at 6 a.m. on the way to work.
I think George did well in advertising because he studied the game, so to speak, and he made sure he knew more than the rest of us did.
George was a terrific friend. He was a outstanding leader, very talented, creative.
He had a natural ability to lead, which is actually quite rare. And he just led through the personality that he had and the person that he was.
I just think he'll always be remembered as a guy who was very fair, a guy who was great fun, a guy who was a great mentor.
One of the things I think that we've lost in this business in general is the whole idea of mentoring young talent. And I think George was a great example of that.
George is a great teacher, actually. He was a really good teacher.
He had the ability to talk to creative folks and inspire them as opposed to talk down to them.
He was just the same to everybody. He was great to the guys on top, and he was great to the guys on the bottom.
There's one moment I had with George, and it's one of those moments you're glad you had. And I was talking about George, and it's like, I've got the opportunity to work with a lot of great creative directors, and they've all taught me a lot, about how to be better creatively or think differently or extend yourself. And I said, but no one, George, has taught me much about being a creative director than you. And he, no. And I straight up said, fuck off, George. I go, it's true. I go, you taught me not only to be a great creative director, but a better man. And I thanked him, and then we kind of said, okay, stop being gay, and we drank beers.
What a great personality he was in our business. He was one of those guys that showed us all how to laugh and how to have fun, no matter how much pressure was in it.
All along in this business in Detroit, there was a tendency to take ourselves too seriously, and George was one of those people that just didn't allow that to happen.
A guy like George made advertising fun.
I'm not sure why he got into it.
I think like most of us, advertising's probably the only discipline that would have us.
He told me many times never to go into advertising.
He probably thought, hey, I could be funny and drink beer and go on shoots. Score.
The great thing about George was that he understood that humor could be a really important business tool.
The guy was a goofball. I mean, he was really a person that had a lot of fun. He worked hard and he played hard. He was constantly trying to get away with stuff.
He was just so raunchy and raw.
He was George. I mean, he just had the delivery, you know.
George has this dirty joke Teflon that not a lot of people have that he can get away with quite a bit.
Everybody would say, oh, you know, that's just George. That's just George.
George would say the most inappropriate thing at the most appropriate time.
Did he just say that?
I have a rather large fish tank in my spacious double-wide cube. And George came over and everyone was marveling at this 80-gallon monstrosity. And without missing a beat, he picked up a water bottle, an empty water bottle, and he proceeded to fill it with water in the tank. And we all watched as it sank to the bottom of the tank, and he yelled, "Look, Lake Erie."
George loved to have nicknames for people.
Matt Balser was Matt Balsack.
Oh boy, who do I want to get in trouble?
He called me Woodpecker.
George used to call me Miss Alternative Lifestyle.
One of my favorite was Bree Brownhole.
I think he gave my dog the nickname Mr. Pants. Why you call a dog Mr. Pants, I don't know, but it stuck, and me and my wife still call my dog Mr. Pants.
Kristen Hartswigen was Fart Squeezin'.
Jenny Hochtaner came to join us at Leo Burnett, and I took her around to introduce her to people. And I introduced her to George, and immediately he had a nickname for her.
Cock Tamer.
No matter who you were, you weren't safe with George.
I think we all kind of wanted that. I mean, the person who was the target loved it because they knew they were getting that kind of extra special attention.
He always had kind of half a grin on his face because he was thinking of something that nobody else was, and I loved him for that.
Every day you were with George, he said something that just you couldn't believe, and he shouldn't have said, and he didn't care, and it wasn't meant to be mean. It was just to keep things light.
So inappropriate that it made my inappropriate behavior look not so inappropriate.
Once George had your room number, you didn't know what or who was going to show up at your door in the middle of the night.
George, being George, he was also the coach of the softball team. Back in those days, there was an actual advertising softball league. I could be on second base, and he could be on third base, and he would yell over one of the lines I had presented him earlier in the day for a print ad, and that he didn't like, just to give me shit.
I learned a lot from George, and one of the things I learned from him is that you can disagree wholeheartedly, and at the end of your disagreement, still respect the other person and hug them and laugh after you've already, yelled for a half hour, laugh for 20 more minutes.
I think he was a big kid, and I think he had an awful lot of charm. I think people really liked George and liked hanging out with George and would kind of pretty much forgive him anything.
George didn't need to have skinny jeans or, a vintage T-shirt or anything like that to be cool, because he just was cool.
His sport coat and his hair.
The hair. The flowing hair.
He had great hair, a great voice, a very large ass.
The glasses off with the ham bone, as Chris McCarthy would call it, and just be like, guys.
Make it go away. Make it go away, Russ. Take this ad, take this copy, take this radio script, whatever it is, just make it go away.
He would always have a real sense of humility and a sense of
not taking himself too seriously, even though he always took the work seriously.
I think his sense of humor made people laugh about themselves and to have fun with work and keep things in perspective.
I think he taught us all to have a good time in this business and not take it so serious.
You know, the thing you take away from George is just have fun. Just have fun in life.
When you see the number of lives he's touched, it's pretty amazing.
I think the greatest thing that George got done was to create the memories that we all have of George.
It's kind of funny. It seemed like any time George and I were to play golf, it would be raining. Don't know why. Just kind of happened to be that way. And we're playing along, and I said, George, you having a good time? He's like, hey, I'm just trying to keep up with you, man. I'm just trying to keep up with you. And it's interesting because I think the opposite was true. I think I was always trying to keep up with George.
It's not only about being a great creative, and I think he inspired me to do that, but just be an even better person.
Him not being there for the last handful of months is, you can just feel the difference in everybody.
Someone had told me about the stuff they're doing for Detroit Public Schools, and they're like, have you heard about it, this Blue Door thing? I'm like, no. So I got a quick 2-minute top line about it, and I was blown away. Such a simple and amazing idea, and I was just like, oh my, that is awesome. Way to go on DPS. I go, brilliant, absolutely brilliant, blown away. And he got all sheepish, and he's like, oh, it's like, Jeff, I was going to involve you, but you're kind of busy. And I'm like, George, I go, it's not about that. And I said, I just want to acknowledge that you did an amazing thing. And how proud I was, and shook his hand. And that was my last conversation with George.
We should pick up the phone and make sure we call our friends, because one day there's going to be a time where you're not going to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, George, I miss you.
He'd always end the phone conversation by saying, hey, John, we did pretty good for 2 guys from Dearborn Heights from the traffic department. And I would laugh and say, yeah, George, we did pretty good.
For me, George was just more of one of those great icons that put some realism into this business.
He is very sorely missed in our community, and I know when people think about the great characters of our generation in advertising in Detroit, George is right there at the top of the list, and I certainly miss him.
It was an absolute joy to be in his company.
We are all glad to be a part of his life.
I miss him dearly.
He was just a really good man.
Just that I miss him so much.
I miss you. I miss you a lot.